Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many people have carved out a little bit of time in their day to join us this afternoon. Welcome to Lunch and Lead. This is a partnership between the Leadership Institute at PNW and the Society of Innovators. And it's an opportunity for us to learn, to take a little bit of time at our usual lunch break time to learn from regional leaders, to hear about some best practices, and also to understand that leadership is tough, and it requires bravery, and certainly all leaders have challenges. So we look forward to hearing from a really gifted leader. A friend of many of us on the call, Jon Gilmore, is a community treasure. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story today, but I will share that he's had 35 years of experience in construction. He's an experienced design engineer, a project manager, and he is the CEO of Tonn and Blank. He has an MBA from the University of Notre Dame and has a bachelor's in civil engineering from Purdue University. Good choice, by the way, Purdue University. Excellent choice. He's led Tonn and Blank through a really huge period of growth, and they are now the Midwest's most vital and sought after firm. He's spearheaded more than $2.5 billion of construction projects. His team, he believe across the country, about 250 employees, and then an additional 35 at their new facility in Westville, where they have a offsite construction facility that just opened, I believe, about 2 years ago. So, Jon, I'm not going to use your time, but we are really delighted that you're here with us today to share a little bit about your story and some of the lessons learned along the way. We will be taking questions, so if you would like to put questions as Jon is speaking into the chat, and then he'll speak for about a half an hour, or talk to us a little bit, and then after that we can take questions. You can either put them in the chat as you think of them, or you can save them for that break mark, and then we'll have a little time to chat with him. So, Jon, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila, and thank you to Jason for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. So what I'm going to talk about today, the subject is kind of the paradoxes that exist in leadership. But first, I'm going to share with you a portion of my life story, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to tell you about some of my life-changing moments where those are, in an instant where your life changes course. Some of the people who helped me along the way. Most importantly, how my failures and kind of shortcomings were the most influence on who I am today and how I lead. So bear with me on the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully I can get through it here. Oops. Okay, there we go. So who am I? I was born right here in Michigan City at St. Anthony Hospital. That was my first life-changing moment. And then 50 years later, I was fortunate enough to be able to build the replacement to the place I was born right here in Michigan City. My grandmother, the story goes, my grandmother wanted to name me after my Uncle John, but she wanted to give me an advantage in life. So she had me spell my name Jon. So I only had 3 letters to memorize so that I could get a head start. My early life wasn't what some would call an ideal situation, but as with everything, I wouldn't change anything because it's made me what I am today. Up until 5 years old, my younger brother and I lived with my single mother. In kindergarten, I would set my own alarm clock, back the old wind-up alarm clocks with the bells on it. I'd get up in the morning, scrounge around the house, find what I could find for lunch. And then, although this sounds like a Little House on the Prairie story, I'd walk a quarter mile down the path to get on the bus. And I remember one morning walking out, and the snow was about up to my waist. And I was frantic that I was going to miss the bus. So I hurried down the path as fast as I could. And when I got down there, the first thing I met was a snowplow that threw snow on me and knocked me over. So then for the next hour or so, I had to hide behind a tree every time the snowplow went by. Then finally, my mom called from the house and said, what are you doing out here? School's been canceled. And I even thought to myself at that time, I thought, I'm 5 years old. How am I supposed to know school's canceled? So later that year, my brother and I were asleep in a booth in a restaurant, and my mom was at the tavern next door, and someone called my grandfather, and my grandfather came and picked up my brother and I, and we went and lived with my grandparents for the next 10 years. And one of my greatest regrets is that I really didn't appreciate what they did for myself and my brother. My grandma was a nurse. She was an accomplished musician. She played piano, organ in the church. She was in the orchestra. She played the cello. My grandfather made sure that we made it to every baseball game, made it to 4-H, did all that. But I was ashamed and I was embarrassed because I didn't have that normal family life. Again, that was a regret, but what that did was, quite frankly, it drove me. It made me just want to get better. It made me throw myself into sports and academics. One of my first mentors was a man named Bob Schellinger. He was the baseball and football coach at South Central at that time. And he took me under his wing and helped teach me toughness and resiliency and motivation, because he could see that I was, somewhat troubled as a young person. So then my senior year in high school, I was captain of the baseball team, near the top of my class academically, and I was president of the student body. And I thought, okay, I'm finally making it. I'm finally getting out of my situation. Then one of my classmates, who's also a teammate of mine, him and I never really got along. I said, Matt, why don't you like me? Well, what's wrong? And he said to me, I don't like you because you think you're better than everybody else. You think you're Mr. Everything. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And it taught me a very valuable lesson, which again was a life-changing moment, where other people don't see you as you see yourself, almost never. And to be an effective leader, you have to understand, you have to look through other people's eyes because it's different. And also be humble. Other people don't care what your accomplishments are, quite frankly. They care how you can help them, how you can bring them forward. So that was a great lesson in life. It hurt, but it was true, and I've learned from it. Then also my senior year, I got called down. I remember it was on a Friday afternoon. We had a football game that night, and I got called down to the student counselor, Mrs. Edgecombe, and she asked me, where are you going to go to college? I said, I don't know. That's a year away. Why are we worrying about this now? And she explained to me that, you have to apply now in order to get into college. So I said, okay. She said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. She said, well, you got really good math scores. So how about engineering? I said, all right, engineering it is. So life-changing moment. At that moment, I became a civil engineer. She helped me apply to colleges, and I got accepted at Purdue, which was great. There was only one problem. I didn't have any money. And I wasn't eligible for financial aid because my parents wouldn't disclose their financials. So I really thought I wasn't going to go to college, and was just kind of trying to figure out, maybe what I do next. And that's when my stepfather, Jim Brown, who I always consider my true father, said he would help me through college. So again, a life-changing moment. Then that fall, I knew I had to get a job for the summer. So the only construction company that I knew of was Tonn and Blank, because I always saw their yellow trucks driving around. So I showed up at the office here in Michigan City, the old office at 126 East 5th Street, walked in, talked to the receptionist. Her name was Linda Bailey. She later became my administrative assistant. And I asked Linda if they took applications for internships. And right then, Bill Mueller was walking by, who was the president of Tonn and Blank, and Linda waved him down. He looked very disgusted that he got waved down to talk to me. And I asked him, I said, so do you guys take interns? He said, oh, no, we don't take interns here. I said, well, do you have any jobs? He said, well, you could be a laborer. I said, okay, that's fine with me. He said, but I don't hire the laborers. Joe Core hires the laborers. You got to go see him. So again, life-changing moment. Bill walking by the office. So he sent me down to the yard to see Joe Core. And Joe, of course, said, who are you? What are you doing here? And I said, well, Mr. Mueller back at the office said you're supposed to hire me as a laborer. And he kind of looked at me for a minute and said, okay, be here tomorrow. And that's when my career started at Tonn and Blank. But the real life-changing moment, I didn't even realize it at the time. And this is something I tell people all the time is, Don't take a job just because of the money, because the money will follow. At that time in 1987, minimum wage is $3.35 an hour. A union laborer made over $15 an hour. So right then that day, I was able to pay for the rest of my school through that job that Tonn and Blank gave me. So I worked 3 summers at Tonn and Blank as a laborer. And then the last summer, Bill Mueller called me back in his office and said, I hear you've been doing a good job, but just because you're a good laborer doesn't mean you'll be a good project manager. So we want to bring you in the office over the summer and see what you can do. So I worked that summer for Tonn and Blank in the office. And at the end of the summer, Bill brought me in and said, yeah, we'd like to hire as a project manager, but we haven't hired a project manager here in 10 years. So we don't even know what to pay you. So why don't you go out and see if you can get a job offer and come back and tell us, you know, what the market is. So I went out, I interviewed all over the country. I got 7 job offers. I wrote them all down. Again, naive kid, walked in, handed Bill the 7 job offers. He took his calculator out, added them all up, divided by 7 and said, here's your salary. And his point was, and I use this all the time, was he said, I don't want you to come here because you're going to make a couple $1,000s more money. I want you to come here because I want you to work here. I want you to want to be here. So it goes back to what I said was the money will follow. Okay. Do the right thing, take the job you want and the money will follow you. And there has not been a one day, I can honestly say, that I've regretted coming to Tonn and Blank, or not one day I didn't want to come to work here. So I became a project manager, did lots of fun projects, went all over the country with Tonn and Blank, built Deep River Water Park over in Lake County, did many jobs for the Urschel family in Valpo, now in Chesterton, built Menards stores all over the Midwest, got to build casino boats down in Louisiana and Jacksonville. So this had a great time and experience being with Tonn and Blank as a project manager. Then in 1998, kind of everything changed for both me and Tonn and Blank, in that's when we were purchased by the Franciscan Alliance, which was Sisters of St. Francis Health Services at the time. And that was an interesting time in our company, in that, you know, when I graduated from Purdue in engineering school, I really never thought that I'd be owned by a Catholic healthcare system or work for a Catholic healthcare system. Certainly didn't think that the chairman of our board would be a nun and she'd give me hugs every day, right? Every time I saw her. And what I didn't know at the time was that Bill Mueller had named me as his heir apparent. He didn't tell me that. So, Bill agreed to stay on for 5 years and said this Jon Gilmore kid was going to be the next president. So when I met Sister Jane Marie for the first time, I was confused how she knew what my name was. And then as the story goes, she caught Bill off guard and said, wow, he's really young. How old is he? And Bill knew darn well I was 29 years old, but he told Sister I was 34. So then after that, I always had this angst that Sister was going to ask me how old I was. And I was either going to have to add 5 years and lie to her, or tell her the truth and maybe not, you know, get the job. So anyway, everything went fine. And then 2003, I took over as president of Tonn and Blank. Really, my motto was, you know, don't screw up a good thing, right? Bill had done a great job growing the company. I was the new kid on the block, and I just wanted to come in and change everything. So I wanted to try to grow it under control. At that time, we were about a $65 million company. And as Sheila said, now we're a $250 million a year company. So that's worked well. And then I'll share one last life-changing moment, because again, it's how quickly things can change. One of my first board meetings at Tonn and Blank, I was sharing with the board that my education is in civil engineering, my experience as a project manager, and now I'm running a company, and Franciscan is a $5 billion a year company. So I started hearing words like EBITDA, cash flow, operational expenses versus capital expenses. And, you know, I said, you know, maybe I should go back and get my MBA. And a man named Ed Rabb, who used to be a partner at Crow Chiswick from Michigan City, said, well, John, you know, Tonn and Blank could pay for that, but so that it's not income that you'll be taxed on, we should make it a requirement of your job to have an MBA. So then next thing I know, there's a motion, there's a second, and all of a sudden the requirement of my job was to have an MBA. And I hadn't even discussed it with my wife. I had 2 young kids at the time and just started as president. So that's how things change in a moment. But I got my MBA from Notre Dame and very glad I got it. So now I at least speak accounting. What I should have done was just got a dictionary and I would have been fine. But and then under Franciscan, my boss has been Kevin Leahy. He is the CEO and president of Franciscan Alliance. And Kevin is what I would call the definition of a servant leader. Everything is for the mission. Everything is for his people. He's one of the most humble and intelligent men I've ever met. And I'm just blessed to have had both him and Bill Mueller as my mentors. And I hope that someday I can do the same for others. A little bit about Tonn and Blank. Sheila gave you kind of the rundown. This is our 100th year in business. We have 5 offices: Michigan City, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Lafayette, and then our off-site construction facility in Westville. Right now, we have about 275 employees. As I said, we do about $250 million worth of work a year. We act as an owner's representative, a construction manager, design builder. We manage all Franciscan's real estate. Over the last 100 years, we've done work in 49 states. And then about half of our work is for Franciscan Alliance. And then the other half of our work is for, other clients. As I said, Urshel Labs, YMCA's, the courthouse that we did here in LaPorte or in Michigan City for LaPorte County. But the best thing about working for Franciscan Alliance is that every dollar that we make at Tonn and Blank goes back to Franciscan and helps the poor and underserved of the communities where we live. So it's different than working for other owners. And that's why, again, I love working here. I love coming to work every day because of our mission, because the sisters allow us to give back to the community. It really makes a difference. So I like to, our invitation. So I've got a typo there, but so on Thursday, you're all invited to a party here at Tonn and Blank, our open house to celebrate our 100th year from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. here at 1623 Greenwood Ave. Our marketing person made me put that in. So talking about paradoxes. So I'm going to talk about how in life and being a leader is full of paradoxes. So what's a paradox? It's a situation that seems to contradict itself, but still may be true. So as you see, the red button says that the green button's always true, and the green button says that the red button's always false. So how can they both exist at the same time? I like this one because I think I saw this in Canada one time when I was going fishing. That's another example of a paradox. The first one I wanted to talk about is intentional and genuine. So you have to be both, right? So as a leader, you're always going to have an agenda. And that's what you do as a leader, right? We have things to get done. We have to get it done. But you have to be sincere when you deliver your agenda, which, again, that's what makes it the paradox. And the way I approach this is I go back to my self-awareness, right? I know what I do badly. And you can't be fake when you're trying to lead, when you're trying to get an agenda done. People can tell when you're not sincere. People know, people all have a BS meter, right? They all know immediately when you're not being sincere to them. So what I try to do is I try to lean into my weaknesses. One of my weaknesses is I'm an introvert, right? I much rather would write a report than go do a presentation. So by leaning into that and being an extrovert, going out and seeing our people, seeing our customers, like I always say, I don't like to shake hands and kiss babies, but you got to do it. And then your strengths will come out naturally. So in order to be intentional and be a genuine leader, I believe you need to be very self-aware and you need to lean into your weaknesses. The next one is evolution versus tradition. I just talked about it, Tonn and Blank. We've been around 100 years. So we have a lot of tradition, a lot of what we're proud of. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we can keep doing it that way, because if you don't grow as a company, you're going to die. But people hate change and they always want to go to their own comfort zone. An example of that I'd use is 10 years ago, we put in an electronic time card, time entry system. And we took the paper time cards away from the superintendents, and you would have thought we took their firstborn away. They all cried, we can't do our job. It takes too much time to log onto a computer. Then about 5 years ago, we had a software glitch and our software went down. So we gave them all paper time cards for a couple of weeks, and all they did was cry. We can't do paper time cards. It takes too long. You know, we'll never get our job done. So sometimes you kind of got to pull them with you, right? Another example that Sheila had mentioned is our offsite construction facility. It's a state of the art. It's a new way of building. We are building hospitals, factories, other buildings inside of a factory down in Westville. And so the new hospital, some of you may have seen being built in Crown Point on I-65, all 199 bathrooms for the patient rooms were built inside of this factory. And we got so much pushback when we started this initiative. The designers said, we can't design it this way. And our people said, we'll never be able to install it. It won't fit, it won't work, but it has worked. So that's an example of, you know, the path of least resistance may be the easiest path to go down, but it's often not the path that we want to take as leaders. Give respect, get respect. Extremely important. I love this this quote. This goes back to being humble, right? This is what I talked about earlier. You have to be humble, and your people will follow you if you inspire them. Your people aren't going to follow you if you just say, I'm the boss, this is the way it is, this is what we're doing. And lead by example. I know that's a cliche, but it's so true. Just show them, you know, again, to get respect, you have to give respect. An example I'll use is our COVID response. Since we're owned by a healthcare company, when COVID hit, we were right with the doctors and nurses. I always compare us to firemen running to the fire. So our people had to go into the hospitals and build infection control walls. We had to convert entire wards to COVID wards. We had to build temporary triage facilities. Then back at the office, some people were saying, we need to close the office. We're afraid we're going to get sick. And I said, no way. We are asking our people to go to the front lines. We're not going to hide. We're coming to work. We're going to show them that we're here for them. And I went and visited every single day for the first 30 days, one of our job sites, whether it was down in Indy, whether it was in Chicago. Sometimes I had to get passports to go to Illinois, but I went there and visited all of them to show them that we supported what they did. And I think as a leader, whether it's for your customers or for your employees, the strength of your relationship is everything with your employees, with your customers. That's how you get loyalty. And, you know, I love the saying by Winston Churchill is don't ever let a good crisis go to waste, right? So if your customer's in crisis, like COVID, like when there's a fire, like when there's a flood, that's when we have to step up and show them that we're there for them. And the same with the employees. When your employees are having personal problems, when they're having struggles, help them. Don't hammer them, help them. And then, you know, I've never, for instance, I go to all of our employees' loved ones' wakes, right? I've flown to Florida to go to a wake for someone. I try to do it no matter what. And if you show the people that you care about them, that you respect them, they'll run through a brick wall for you. Consensus, but a defined vision. So this is really the definition of leadership, right? So we have a vision, we know where we want to go, and we got to get everybody to come with us to get there. So what I found the best way to do is communicate and be transparent. Tell everybody what we're trying to do, and as a team, discuss and discern and make it our idea. I know I'm telling you a lot of weaknesses. I got a lot of them, but one of my flaws is that when someone asks me a question, I want to give them an answer immediately. I just give them an answer instead of listening first. And again, that goes back to being self-aware. When someone comes to my office, or when I get a phone call or I go see someone, the first thing I ask them is, well, what do you think we should do? Right? And 90% of the time they have the same answers I would have, or an answer that gets us to the same place. And sometimes they don't. And when they don't, I try to discuss it with them and talk it through so that it becomes our idea, because our idea seems to get done a much better than my idea. So I really say the best way to do it is work with your employees and make it a team idea or their idea instead of yours. Strategic but tactical. So this is what I mean by this is you have to have a plan, right? But then you also have to get it done. And often we say paralysis from analysis, right? We could spend forever trying to make the plan better and make it perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. So move forward. What I say is let's make a decision. And if that decision's wrong, guess what? We'll make a different one tomorrow to change it, but we'll always be moving forward. And as long as your decision-making process and your discernment process is based upon your values, your ethics, and your morals, you're going to do well. I always say, do good, do well. If you do good things, you'll do well in business. If you're making your decisions based upon profits or sales or things like that solely, then if it's outside of your values and ethics and morals, then you're going to fail. So what I say is move forward, make decisions, and make them based upon the right reasons. So this is the last one and probably the most important one. If you want to lead them, you must serve them. The way I look at it is the only reason why I'm here as a leader is to support the people who actually do the work. They're not here to support me. I'm here to support them. So who is that? Ultimately, it's the laborers and the carpenters and the electricians on our jobs. If you're in healthcare, maybe it's the doctors and the nurses. If you're in education, it's the teachers, right? We're just here to help them. That's why, again, being self-aware, I always try to say after I meet with someone, what do you need from me? How can I help you? That is, in my opinion, one of the most important things you need to do as a leader, and you need to understand as a leader that you're here to help them. And often they say, I need 3 more months on the schedule. That's what you can do for me. Well, I can't give you that. So let's talk about how we can get the schedule done, right? You always can't give them what they want, but they need to know that they can talk to you. It can be an open line of communication, and you will help them if they need help. And then finally, the legacy of leadership. This obviously isn't a paradox, but it's all of our duty to help build the next generation of leaders in our companies, in our communities, and in our world. And we as leaders know that we're on the right path when our main goal is to find who's going to replace us, hire who's going to replace you, train them to replace you, train them to be the next leader of your company. Because if you're threatened by someone below you, then you're no longer a leader. Now you're an obstructionist. So it goes back to, if you do good, you'll do well. If you take care of your people, if you train your people, if you give them the opportunity to lead, they will make you a better leader and give you a better company. So that concludes my presentation. I want to thank again Sheila and Jason for not only allowing me to share my story, but more importantly, giving me the opportunity to self-reflect. I don't do that very often. It was a great exercise for me. And I would recommend to all of you to take a few hours, write down your own story and how you got to where you are today. What's motivated you and what's influenced you over your life will likely be the things that do the same for those who you are leading. Thank you.
Wow, Jon. So many things we didn't know about you. Very good. That was really, really moving. I was taking notes because some of the things that you talked about, give respect to get respect. That spoke to me. Just some of the thoughts that you shared about your challenges and overcoming challenges. You didn't let your challenging childhood define you, and that's there's a lot that all of us can learn from that. So Jason, I'll pass it to you, and maybe we can see if anyone has questions. If you have a question, if you could put them in the chat, and then Jason will kind of facilitate Jon answering a few of our questions.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. And yeah, we do have about 10 to 12 minutes here to answer a few questions. And Jon, thank you again for sharing. I'll just echo Sheila. Fantastic. I loved your personal story and path to where you are now, and obviously the lessons you were able to share with us from that seat you sit in. I'll pull two questions we already have in the chat that really I think pair well together. So we have a question from Andrea, asks, what skills did you bring to the table that make you a good project manager? And then the second part of that is an observation of you shared leaning into your weaknesses. And so how does that help you as a leader grow? So I guess really looking at both sides. So first, if you could talk about the skills you see in yourself that did make you that good project manager, and then maybe unpack a little more of then recognizing your weaknesses on the other side.
Sure. So I think being a good project manager is having a to-do list and getting it done, right? You need to do it today. Don't wait till tomorrow. I learned when buying out projects is you don't wait 3 months to buy all your project out. You do it while it's fresh in your mind. You get it done, you get it off your list. Often people say to me, my own people say, I don't know how you can get all this done. Well, the way I do it is I do it right now. That way I don't have things to do tomorrow. So that's probably my biggest advice as far as project management is staying on top of things, because if you let it get behind, it'll eat you alive. And I'm sorry, Jason, what was the follow-up to that?
Yeah, then on the flip side of that, you had talked about kind of leaning into your weaknesses as a leader, but can you in your experience, how has that helped you grow as a leader? Well,
so I'll use the project management example. Get it done right now. Well, if you get it done right now, you might make a mistake too, right? So I still think that it's better to make a mistake and then fix the mistake than it is to wait and vacillate on it. So I think that again is one of my biggest lessons as being a project manager for 15 years is stay on top of things.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And then we have another question on here related to innovation. And I guess I'll take this as a plug to recognize that Jon and his team, really company-wide at Tonn and Blank, were recognized and inducted into the Society of Innovators back in 2020, in part, well, not in part, for all of the work they did with Franciscan to really help navigate through COVID and the ability to help those teams stay not only safe, but also effective through that, as far as, how do you adjust to all the needs they had in the hospital system at that time. But the question, Jon, is specific to innovations that Tonn and Blank are now up to. I think this is also very relevant in the idea of paradox, right? Of how do you, kind of keep, the business you're working on going and efficiently, but also, right, keeping an eye towards the future and new and the unknown.
Yeah, I think the key to innovation, in my opinion, is just take your problems head on. So the COVID response, for example, we couldn't get gowns, so we made gowns. We couldn't get ultraviolet light machines, so we made ultraviolet light machines. It's like, what's your problem? And I always say, don't fall in love with your excuses, because you can always say, well, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. Fix the problem. There's always a solution, and always remember there is a solution. You just have to think outside the box to get to that solution.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And we have another question on here. And please, if you have any additional questions here, please do feel free to share them in the chat. We have a question from Rosalind, Jon. She comments, our young people need to hear our stories. So thank you for sharing about where, how you got to where you are today. But her question is, does Tonn and Blank have employer-driven volunteer opportunities? And if you think that's a value to local employers to connect with our youth to grow young leaders. And then the follow-up to that is, how might you establish a volunteer program for employees who might not have one?
Okay, I think there's a couple questions there, but so first is we have on our website, we have a community benefit program that's open to anyone that wants to apply. And it goes back to being part of Franciscan Alliance. We started this program actually when I went through a leadership program with Franciscan. Part of my assignment was to come up with an innovative way to extend the sisters' mission. Well, we don't help sick people, right? We don't have doctors, we don't have nurses. So my idea was to put a program in place where our employees can bring projects to us. If their church wants to put an addition on their food bank, if their school wants to do something to their football field. They bring that to us, and then we have a committee, and then we do community benefit projects every day. Many of you are familiar with them. And that's how we give back to the community. We don't like to write checks. We like to do construction projects because we feel we can bring much more value to do that. And then as far as growing leadership, I mean, yes, we are proponents of education. We actually started a program at Tonn and Blank with a partnership between PNW and Ivy Tech, where all of our union people and the carpenters and electricians and several other trades got a degree from Ivy Tech through their apprenticeship. And it was, I didn't even know what this was. It was called a terminal degree. And it was called a terminal degree because it was associates, but it didn't transfer anywhere. So if after they got out of their apprenticeship program, if they ever wanted to get a bachelor's, they would have to start over. So we worked with PNW and Ivy Tech and got PNW to accept Ivy Tech's associate's degree after they made a few changes, and then started a bachelor's degree for our people who are journeymen. We have about 14 people who will be graduating that first class next year, and a new class, a new cohort has been filled for that same program. So we are all about trying to help our people and the people of the community get more education and be able to better themselves.
Jason, may I jump in and ask a question to John? So John, a lot of people on the call probably don't know the role of the sisters in that you're owned by the sisters. Some of us in LaPorte County know that story, but just share a little bit of insight into how that changes your business model. I think that's so interesting. I've been to some of the events where, you know, the ceremonies start with a prayer and end with a prayer or a blessing. I know some of your business meetings, they start with a blessing that good work will be accomplished. How does that in general, with all the different trades that you work with, all the employees that are part of your organization, how does that change the organization?
Yeah, it really does change our culture because, you know, we're construction people. So, you know, we cuss and drink and, you know, do all the things we're not supposed to do. Right. But, you know, Sister Jane Marie will tell you that she goes on job sites and she doesn't hear any of that or see any of that. Well, that's partly because we say sister's coming. Right. But it goes back to the mission. You know, we all know, all of us, all 275 of us, plus the thousands of others that work on our jobs from our subcontractors, that we're doing more than just building a building, right? We're making a difference. We're building hospitals that'll be here for 50 to 100 years. We're building the facilities that our families are going to go into when they're sick. And it just makes it different. That's, like I said, that's why I don't mind coming to work. I love coming to work. And the fact that everything we do ultimately goes back to our community, you have to have that belief and you have to have that in your heart in order to work here. And not everybody does. Not everybody makes it here, right? Some people are like, well, aren't you about making money? I mean, I can make you a lot more money. I tell people all the time, you'll never get fired at Tonn and Blank for losing money on a job. Now, if you lose money on every job, that might be a different story, but you might get fired if you make too much money on a job if you do it unethically, right? So that's the difference here, is that we're here for the long run. We're here to help our community. And of course, we're here to make a profit. That's the definition of a business, but our profits go to the right places. And that just gives us a different level of pride. And also, I think, improves how we do our work and how much we care about what we do.
Thanks, John. That's really great insight. Any other questions, Jason, or are we just about finished? I think we have 2 more minutes. Anyone have a question or a comment? All right. John, thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us today. I forgot to introduce Makisha Neal Richardson, who's on the screen. She is the assistant director of the Leadership Institute, and there's a couple other PNW folks on. So thank you everyone for joining us today. John, you shared some tremendous leadership lessons, and you know, I really appreciate you being authentic and vulnerable in sharing that you, like all the rest of us, have we're not perfect people. And sometimes people who are the leaders, everyone expects perfection. And you kind of broke that down for us and talked about how that is the paradox of leadership. You can be human, and you just are, we're all works in progress. So thank you so much for sharing. Thanks everyone. Hope the rest of your week goes really well. Bye-bye now.